Back to our top story now. Is this the end of the road legally for government in its bid to have the Gupta brothers extradited to South Africa? Or are there other legal avenues to pursue? For more, I'm joined telephonically by Llewelyn Curlewis, a senior lecturer in procedural law and law of evidence at the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much, Mr. Curlewis, for your time. So we may be too quick to criticize the NPA and our Department of Justice. They say they ticked all the boxes and all legal processes were followed correctly. What's also concerning is that seemingly they didn't know for more than 6 weeks that the court hearing had already taken place to deny the request to extradite the Gupta brothers to South Africa. In your view, what went wrong here?
Yeah. Thank you, and nice to have a chat this evening. Yes, what a conundrum we find ourselves in. Now, with all due respect, it's easy to shift the blame, and that is exactly what government, and more specifically the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, wants to do. But what comes to mind, if one take cognizance of the media statement issued by the Minister's Office, is basically the timelines that they provide us. It's clear that there was not real effort on the side of the department via the offices of the Director General, who is the responsible central authority and responsible for the liaison between the South African government and the UAE in this instance. That there's no real evidence, chain of evidence that they followed up on a regular basis. Once in a blue moon, there was a correspondence or a letter, and that's about it. So obviously, they will have to answer a couple of questions, and not only the Department of Justice, but also the National Prosecuting Authority, because between the two institutions, the public wants to have answers. As things currently stand, the only alternative for the government is obviously to try and persuade their counterparts in the UAE to possibly appeal the decision of the judge that rejected the application. But that being said, we might once again be out of the timelines for a possible appeal. And second of all, in the meantime, the Guptas apparently have also skipped Dubai and the UAE and find themselves in Switzerland somewhere. Now, the question now arises, what now? Can we now approach the Swiss government? And that will depend on our diplomatic interaction between these two countries. But for what it's worth, we should pursue that appeal in Dubai if all else fails, because they still have property and investments and other assets there, and one can be sure that they might find themselves sooner than later back in Dubai for whatever reason. And then Interpol will hopefully then by that time intervene, and if we can successfully appeal this current state of affairs, then we will have something to go by. But other than that, we have a problem. We have a major problem, and I don't see in the foreseeable future that we're going to have them back in South Africa to stand trial for money laundering and theft and fraud for what they will be charged via.
Let's take a step back here and look at the jurisdiction issue. The United Arab Emirates Court had ruled that there was money laundering offences allegedly committed in the UAE as well as in South Africa, and that obviously the UAE had jurisdiction to prosecute the Guptas there. Are they obliged by law to pursue those charges, or is it up to them?
No. Obviously, every country is sovereign. So that means that they will have an exclusive jurisdiction to decide whether they want to prosecute for alleged transgressions in their country and under their auspices and jurisdiction. But because they have so-called co-jurisdiction for the money laundering offences, they can prosecute. There's nothing to prevent them from doing so, just like South Africa can do the same if they set foot in this country. But joint jurisdiction means both countries can prosecute. And obviously, if they find themselves in the UAE, obviously they will have the prerogative or first choice to prosecute them, but at least for the money laundering offences. The government of Dubai and UAE did not indicate whether they are also intent or possibly have the intention to sue them for or to prosecute them for the theft and the fraud cases. So even on that level, the second leg of the charges should have at least get then the authority and the prerogative for the extradition after they have prosecuted them for the money laundering back to South Africa to stand trial on those charges. But we have lost out on both occasions for both types of offences, both the money laundering as well as the theft and fraud charges. So South African government sit with a conundrum, a red face in the eyes of the world, and this was supposed to be one of our top priorities if we have taken cognizance of President Ramaphosa and government's stance on the matter after the Zondo Commission of Inquiry's sentiments.
So we've heard a lot of criticism against officials for not doing enough to follow up on this. You yourself have said the department and the NPA have a lot of questions to answer. We spoke earlier to a spokesperson for the department, Crispin Piri, who said that in any country in the world, the only way you know whether a hearing is going to take place is when you are notified of such. And if you are not notified, then, well, you're not going to be there. How do you feel about that response from the department?
Yeah, that's a very rapid answer to get out of the trouble. The fact of the matter is we have an ambassador and we have a diplomatic office in the UAE. With all due respect, these type of prosecutions have headlines. They are all over the news. They are displayed in social media as well as other platforms. And surely, if all else fails, our representatives over there should have at least then picked it up and brought it under the attention of the ambassador and our diplomatic services. So, no, that is way too easy to shift the blame. I'm not convinced that we've done everything in our power to follow it up regularly and at least through all the right channels.
If the department and the NPA had to, for instance, pursue an extradition request to another country, whether that be Switzerland or whatever country the Guptas find themselves in, that process would obviously have to start from scratch. We know it is a lengthy process requiring a lot of consultation between the two countries. Is there a statute of limitations for an extradition to take place?
Yeah, first of all, I want to agree with you with your observation. I do agree it's usually a long process. Everything starts basically all afresh from day one because it's a brand new application. It must be lodged to the new foreign country, in this instance maybe Switzerland or wherever. And that's on the assumption that we have some kind of a treaty in place that permits us to have such a application to be lodged there. It's not necessarily self-explanatory that they also form part of the European Union, Section 17 there specifically. But the fact of the matter is we can investigate that and it might not be too difficult to find out. But on par with that, forget about the prescription period for such an application. In South Africa, we've got a prescription period for offences of this nature, namely 20 years in terms of Section 18 of our Criminal Procedure Act. And remember, by the time we had the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, some of these offences were already at that stage 10 or 12-decade-old cases. So every month, every year that lapses brings us nearer to a 20-year prescription period in which we might, in any event, even if we get them extradited to South Africa after 20 years, not prosecute them successfully every year. So we have a problem, definitely.
There's been criticism that there isn't sufficient political will to try and get the Guptas back in South Africa. Do you agree?
Well, I don't want to talk politics because that's out of my sphere of expertise. But it seems to me that one would have expected a more interest in this matter if the government was very serious in the prosecution of, especially the Guptas, because they seem to be the pinnacle of the crux of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture and the responsible family for where our current state of affairs, our economic dire strait that we find ourselves in currently. So, yes, there's always the politics and law always goes hand in hand. It's not exactly the same thing, and obviously must never be. But you cannot have the one without the other.
Thank you so much for your insights. That was Llewelyn Curlewis, a senior lecturer in procedural law and law of evidence at the University of Pretoria, giving us some insights into the situation with that request for the extradition of the Gupta brothers being denied by the United Arab Emirates.